just confirm that we are record. Okay, great. Saw that pop up. All right, so I'd like to welcome our guest speaker, Paul Sottle from 100 Kilometer Foods. Paul is the CEO, founder, and owner of the company, along with his partner, Grace, who, to my understanding, saw a gap between chefs in Toronto who wanted to find fresher local ingredients and farmers and producers in the GTA that didn't really have the means to deliver their product into the city. I think as we're all looking for new markets and distribution channels for our project, we can find a lot of inspiration from Paul's message tonight. So thank you, Paul, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
All right. Have I successfully unmuted myself? I don't see any faces. I'm assuming that yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm actually a proud born and raised son of Durham region. I was raised in the northeast of Oshawa when north of Taunton was largely farmland. And as I return home to see my parents and sister, I'm always amazed at how quickly that community is changing. But all my formative years were spent in Durham region, and I cherish those memories immensely. So it is an honor to come full circle and speak to you folks this evening. Things are being recorded. I have instructed my young children that I'm busy, so over my shoulder here, there is a small chance that a small child will emerge, but I've tried to be very clear that they're not to disturb Daddy for an hour or so. So yeah, thank you again for having me. I will, I guess, minor correction to the introduction. I would call myself co-founder and co-owner. My partner and I were equal in the endeavor of this, the creation of 100 Kilometer Foods. And I'll get into kind of who we are, what we do, how we do it, and obviously leave some room for some questions at the end. This is my first virtual PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to be asking Allison to flip my slides. So bear with us if there's any glitches along the way, but we'll get started. So if we could have the next slide, please. All right, perfect. So in terms of what you can expect this evening, so I want to give a brief introduction of who we are, for those that don't know, what 100 Kilometer Foods is, why we do it, how we do it, a infamous day in the history of our organization, March 17th, 2020, as I'm sure is common for many of you folks, what we've learned since and what we've done since, and what's next, both for our organization and I guess if I were to take the opportunity to have a crystal ball into the future of consumer behavior and what's going to be relevant in the near term. I'm going to give some postulations there with an asterisk that I don't think anything is fully predictable anymore, but I will do my best. And next slide, please. So 100 Kilometer Foods is a local food distribution company. In the United States, we're called a local food hub. And basically what that means is we aggregate from a network of farms and sell to a network of end customers, be it mostly, well, for the large amount of our history was all business to business. So predominantly restaurants, independent retailers, hotels. But for the most part, and basically until March 17th, we were purely a business to business organization. We've won a few awards along the way, which we're immensely proud of, including the Premier's Award for Agri-Food Innovation. A few were certified B Corporation. For any of those that aren't aware of what that is, that's a certification, a third-party certification for businesses that have a triple bottom line. So they not only do they have economic goals, but they also take it's basically a holistic view of the stakeholders of an organization, all the way down from the suppliers to the environment you work in, treatment of your own staff, the treatment of staff of your vendor partners. We're very proud to have won 4 years running, and hopefully 5 years this year, a Best for the World Award for Community Impact, meaning that We scored in the top 10% of all global B Corps in terms of our impact on our community, and this being the local food economy and farming community and network that we work with, and then of course all the social spin-offs and endeavors that we support through our partnership with the Stop Food Community Center and a few other organizations. But really the nuts and bolts of our organization is we are a network of, we are one-stop shop to a network of Ontario producers for chefs. And conversely, for the farms that we work with, we are a single channel through which they can access let me step back one time. For most of this presentation, I'm going to speak about kind of pre-COVID terms of who we are, what we do. There's a big asterisk on all of this now, of course, post March 17th, but we're very hopeful that those days will return. So I'm going to speak to kind of how we operate like it's going to be back to normal one day, which I'm truly hopeful that it will be. Yes, we will go to the next slide, please. So Grace and I, this slide is to speak to kind of who we are and where we came from. So the slide on the left, the corporate kind of skyscrapers and the ominous looking, or the kind of beautiful sky, but the overarching buildings. We came from the corporate world. We met doing pharmaceutical sales, of all things. We kind of joke that at a university, I got that job, and I won't go into the long story, but through a series of events, I joked that I had a quarter life crisis, and quickly realized that our personal values and the values by which we made a living were not congruent. There was largely disconnects there, and I was fundamentally unhappy doing what I did, and we were looking for a big change. So what we did is not dissimilar to this middle photograph. We looked at a map and quit our jobs and decided to travel a good portion of the world for 7 months in 2007. Upon returning, we were looking for jobs that, quote unquote, kind of fit our values, and we were applying to things like Bullfrog Power at the time, and trying to convince organizations that we were a good fit, but it ultimately didn't work out for the better, because we wouldn't be where we are today. But we were trying to kind of had that feeling of fitting a round peg in a square hole, or a square peg in a round hole. We just kind of had this set of values that we're looking for work that would kind of meet those values, but it proved to be a very challenging and daunting task at the time. Next slide, please. So we returned from our trip in Asia, and we moved in with my partner's parents in Mississauga, in 2 single beds separated by a chair. And it was motivation in and of itself, just to kind of, I was close to 30 at the time, now unemployed and living with my in-laws' parents. There's motivation to make something happen. We were speaking about our personal values earlier. So one of the things that we were interested in, and one of the veins through which we were looking for work, was around sustainability, around food. Through the history of our time in Toronto in different neighborhoods, we always kind of gravitated to the local coffee shop that had the fair trade organic coffee, and the healthy butcher, and the green grocer that had local foods and organic foods. And we had a similar idea whereby the original iteration of 100 Kilometer Foods was actually to link these different businesses within Toronto through a delivery service. So the catchment area wasn't limited just to the surrounding people in the area that could walk or have a short drive to a store, but could open it up to a greater area in Toronto. And around the same time, this was the fall of 2007, we went to what proved to be a life-changing discussion. It was called The Politics of Local Food, which was a panel discussion at the St. Lawrence Centre for the Arts in Toronto. And it was a panel discussion of chefs and farmers and producers, not unlike yourselves, Basically speaking, if I were to summarize it, saying that they wanted to work together, but for a myriad of reasons, many of which you guys are familiar with, it was challenging. So from the farmers on the panel, they said, I want to sell the city, but I don't want to pack up a truck and drop off a single or one to two or three cases at 50 different restaurants. Similarly, chefs on the panel are saying, I want to work with local farms. I want to get the freshest products available, but I don't have time to go to the weekly farmers market down the street, let alone try to forge relationships with local farmers, coordinate deliveries. So we kind of had that cliche light bulb moment and looked at each other and thought, this is a legitimate express need, and this is something we could do. As we started to pitch the idea to some Toronto chefs, the first thing that we realized that we're onto something is we started cold calling some of the top chefs in Toronto, kind of with a very loose idea of connecting them with a network of farms through a single channel, and everyone was returning our call. So we either thought we were extraordinarily naive and were in way over our heads, or we were onto something. And I think ultimately the truth was probably a blend of both. But what we got from those early conversations was there was a real express need from a chef standpoint to find a supplier that could connect them to kind of the best and the freshest that Ontario had to offer. And similarly, when we had the farm network at the beginning was a little bit more challenging, I think much to our surprise, but it was about gaining the trust of an initial network of producers that thought this was a good idea, were willing to work with people that frankly didn't know what they were doing, and saw some potential in this from the beginning. I remember one farmer well, I won't say the town because it might be clear who they are, but his first comments to us were, yeah, I'll sell you things, but bring your checkbook. And I realized that was actually quite valid advice. And I drove around for the first 2 years with a checkbook in hand until Grace pried it from my hands because she couldn't control where the money was going. But it was that kind of interaction that I think gained the trust of these individuals right from the beginning. Next slide, please. So one of the things we wanted to do was build a business that I alluded to prior that fit our values. So we wanted to make something that we wanted to get up and do every day. And specifically when you're entrepreneurs and you have your own business, hopefully it's also a passion of yours. It's that kind of special sauce ingredient that makes everything click in the end, and in very tough times makes you persevere, and in good times make you really thankful for the opportunity and grateful for the team around you and what you've been able to build. So the values that we're kind of trying to build this business around were environmental sustainability, fairness and equity, being part of a solution, not a problem, having meaningful work, which in and of itself I think is a undervalued career goal, community building, and have fun, something that we could create and enjoy doing. And I think we were very successful in doing that, and still to this day, albeit after a very challenging year, I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else, even at this moment. Next slide, please. So this is, I didn't draw this, it's overly complicated and probably very too small for your screen, but this is a drawing that was done by a PhD researcher on local food systems. It's basically outlining who we are and what we do. I'll nutshell it with you in combination with the next slide, but basically we obviously sell and distribute foods from local farmers. They let us know what they have available from a weekly basis, and then we originally populated that on an Excel spreadsheet and manually recorded the orders on the couches every Friday night with a pen and a ruler and usually a glass of wine after a long week. And then based on that availability, chefs will place their orders through then the Excel spreadsheet. Now we've evolved to have an e-commerce system And then basically we pick it up and deliver it and repeat the process. So we have a centralized depot that's basically the hub of our model, and then we have different farm routes that go out and fan out into different areas in the GTA and collect products from local farms and local producers. Next slide, please. So I was referring to this before. So what we were able to do from a farm standpoint is be that single channel through which they could access an urban market of restaurants and business-to-business clients that they didn't necessarily want to pound the pavement and form those relationships, or load up a truck and deliver themselves, or chase money, or whatever those reasons might be. But for them, the risk was reasonably low because we were, especially in the beginning, we were driving directly to the farm gate, picking the products up. We were picking up only sold orders for basically 11 years of our company. We started inventorying some less perishable goods as the business evolved, but in terms of fruits and vegetables, we were only picking up from farms what we had already earmarked for a sale. What that meant for us was that there was a lot less waste. In those early days, we could not afford to buy 6 cases of tomatoes and sell 4, because as you guys know, the loss from those other 2 cases are going to negate, and probably then some, all of the margin on those first 4 orders. So it wasn't necessary. We had to grow with our relationship with these farms, and in those early days, some of those orders were quite meager. And we had 12 restaurants on the other side at the beginning, so about 12 farms and 12 restaurants. So the orders were quite small, and we went to the farms once a week, and I delivered twice, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And as we grew the company and the customer base, we switched to going to the farms twice a week and added a truck. And then we switched to, eventually, probably about 7 or 8 years in, we started going to the farms 8 days a week, or not 8 days a week, 4 days a week, pardon me, with 4 different farm routes. And the orders, of course, kind of reflected that. So for the people that joined us at the very beginning and stayed with us, they've kind of evolved and grew with us as we go. For the chefs, again, this was a single channel through which they were accessing many different farm products. We were doing all the sales, basically, the marketing, the collating of the orders, the shipping, the receiving, and probably most importantly, the collecting of the money and paying the bills. And we were just basically repeating this. It was kind of a leapfrog system where everything would come into the warehouse, get picked and packed overnight, and then sent out the next day. Next slide, please. One of the things I was asked to talk about is the lens through which we vet our vendors. So at the beginning, we were super grateful that an organization that many of you might be familiar with, Local Food Plus, was in existence. So back to our kind of core values of what we were trying to do, we weren't looking to kind of sell local food for the sake of it. We were specifically looking to sell local food that was sustainable, that had the environment top of mind. When we learned about Local Food Plus and learned about their criteria of looking at treatment of farm labor and use of water and wildlife habitat preservation on farmland, it was a godsend insofar as kind of serving up that plate of that potential roster of farms that we started cold calling and in the winter of 2008 going up and sitting at kitchen tables. So at the beginning, it was kind of that Local Food Plus core group of farms that we used. And since then, we've evolved. So we've evolved to sell more than fruits and vegetables. It went from fruits and vegetables to dry goods. And then we added dairy and cheese, and now we sell meat. And now there's other criteria here because we've started to expand beyond just Ontario. So our first real asterisk, what I'll get to, comes down a few bullets later. But in terms of our criteria, what we're looking at right now, and we sell some prepared products as well too. So where is the product grown? So usually 99% of the time that's in Ontario, or where is the main ingredient source from? So again, referring to those prepared goods. Can it be grown or sourced in Ontario? So for something that we carry that is not from Ontario, can it be? Because we are not looking to substitute anything that we can get locally. What are the growing practices? Does this product regenerate the environment or the community? And I guess this is where the first major asterisks of our offering came into play. So we met the family or the couple behind Fogo Island Fish, which is a community-based cod fishery, very small cod fishery, hand-line cod fishery in Fogo Island in Newfoundland. And they were actively courting us to try to carry their products. And because it was such a major asterisk, we said no for a better part of a year. After hearing their story and what they were doing and what they're trying to accomplish, there was no question that it fit the ethos of what we were trying to do. At their core, they are a social enterprise. They are trying to develop and restore the community and the economy of Fogo Island through a very sustainable cod fishery and cod fishing method specifically. So it was kind of the first major asterisk of local food being from Ontario only. And of course, everyone knows you can't get cod from Ontario, but it definitely was something that aligned with our values, and we launched that maybe about 3 years ago. Can procurement integrate with our systems? So can we do the systems line up? Some people operate differently. Obviously, companies operate differently, and we needed something that fit into our existing systems. As soon as you started having aberrations here and there, it became a real challenge to potentially work together. And so we need something that was relatively seamless. What are the other channels that distribute this product? So ideally, it's not something that everybody carries. We also ideally don't like to compete or want to compete with anybody doing their own direct marketing. We don't propose to be the panacea for everybody and everyone. And if somebody has great marketing relationships and relationships themselves, that's not something we're looking to replace, unless, of course, that party is looking to get some help with that or get out of that particular space of the sales cycle. Question around packaging and does it take the environment into consideration? This is kind of it is in hierarchical order. So we're having considerations around packaging as well, and then the vendor have any red flags in terms of reputation. This doesn't come off very often. We've only fired, for lack of a better word, 3 vendors in our history. One was just a reliability issue and somebody that had some other commitments that was making it a very hard challenge to work with them. One was an egregious incident with one of our staff that didn't sit well, and his treatment of one of our drivers. And another was a farm that was charged with human trafficking, which was obviously a major red flag and something that we were not keen on affixing our reputation to. Next slide, please. So again, pre-COVID, we were working with over 100 Ontario producers. We were selling over 500 business-to-business clients. We were on pace to have $10 million in revenue this year. That is not going to happen, nowhere close. But we've grown to basically be one of the third largest local food hub in North America, and everything was going well until next slide, please. March 17th. So this was the day restaurants were ordered to close. So at this point, restaurants were represented about 90% of our revenue. So we literally overnight lost 90% of our revenue, and we had a warehouse full of food, did not know what to do, and we were fully in an existential crisis and knew we needed to do something fast and act quickly. One of the things we had always had in the back of our mind, which we had never had the time, energy, or resources to investigate or pursue, was a retail arm of our business. And by retail, I mean not bricks and mortar, but direct to consumer, direct to eater, home, in some fashion. Our ideas kind of ranged from a storefront to a depot or a hybrid depot out of our warehouse. But when March 17th happened, we knew that this was the opportunity, and really out of necessity, we had to do a pivot. So we started our retail side of our business. Next slide, please. Which we now offer to this day. So we joke that we built our wholesale business over 12 years and our retail business over 12 days, and that is not far from the truth, actually. So we scrambled to have an initial launch with our existing wholesale e-commerce site and tried to force fit a system whereby individual consumers could order through that site. We launched it on a Saturday. It immediately failed. And we had to basically start from scratch Monday morning. It was a complete flop in terms of the technology. It wouldn't accommodate what we were trying to do. So probably as likely as many of you have done, we looked to Shopify to create a storefront that was easy to use, that we could self-manage, and just get something up quickly so we had the ability to sell, and then work out the kinks later, which is exactly what we did. Next slide, please. So we launched the market at 100 Kilometer Foods, and what we were trying to do here is offer the same kind of experience we've become to be known for from the chef community, being that connection to where their food comes from, to a network of Ontario producers, to getting reliable and convenient food delivered directly to them, and kind of that connection and full transparency to where food is coming from. And we felt that we were in a unique position to kind of pivot and be able to provide that to individual consumers. It has been an immense challenge, as many of you can probably imagine, and as the opening remarks alluded to, it hasn't been without hiccups, and it's by no means a replacement for our wholesale business-to-business revenue. However, it was very successful in terms of keeping our staff engaged and energized, and having something creative and substantial we could sink our teeth into. Sitting back and waiting for restaurants to return or waiting for COVID to blow over wasn't an option, and I'm sure as heck happy that we didn't choose to go that route at the beginning, because these early days of creating the market at 100 Kilometer Foods were kind of harken back to those early days of the creativity and the energizing nature of solving problems and making something from scratch that was really rewarding and really brought our team together in an extraordinarily difficult time. Next slide, please. So I alluded to this, it has not been without its challenges. Our wholesale and our retail operation is different. The customer profile is very different, so dealing with individual consumers. So we were shielded from much of the potential criticism or critique, for lack of a better word, dealing with chefs, because they were then taking those products and transforming them to something else. The end customer wasn't our customer. However, what we're realizing, and what many of you probably deal with day to day for any public-facing aspects of your business, is that individual consumers can be quite discerning, can be quite, I don't want to say picky, but we'll say picky, and meeting the demands of individuals proved to be a larger target than satisfying business-to-business relationships and chef relationships where they're buying in bulk. And what we found very early on in our business is that the bar for customer service from a wholesaler standpoint in Toronto was remarkably low. The fact that we told chefs in advance that we were going to be short a few items on their order, what seemed to like seemingly groundbreaking, which blew our mind. This was common courtesy in our worlds and where we grew up and how we were raised. But they told us stories of just going to the fridges and looking for things and checking their invoice and only realizing after the fact that they'd been shorted. So we were very much forward-facing in terms of customer service and gain that trust of chefs, but we didn't have a relationship with consumers, and largely we still don't. It's tough to have that same connection with individual people, especially when we can't see them face to face right now. They're basically dealing with a company and a brand, a logo, a website. So it's tough to have that personal connectivity that we've developed with chefs over the years. The cost of labor dealing with a retail operation is exponentially higher. Before, we were just basically repacking, resorting pallets and cases and boxes and 50-pound bags. Now we are weighing out individual things, weighing and splitting out flour, carrots, apples, whatever it might be. The process of doing so is extraordinarily expensive and time consuming, which is a whole new element to manage in our business. Food waste has become an issue for the first time in our existence. Before, I was speaking to our just-in-time model. We basically didn't have food waste. Of course, there was some, but food waste pre-COVID represented 0.03% of our revenue, which is almost nothing. And now some months or some weeks and months, it is 3-4%. For a business whose profit margin in a good time when we're making money is 3 or 4% if we're lucky. To have that evaporate because of food waste is a big challenge. So suddenly we were buying for consumers where we didn't know what they were going to order, and when you guess wrong, you get stuck with the food. And we didn't have a corresponding wholesale market where we could have the channel to get rid of those products. So if we over-guessed on bringing in heirloom tomatoes and they weren't ordered, we didn't have chefs we could call and say, hey, can you take a couple of cases of heirloom tomatoes off our hands? They were going to staff. They were going to local food organizations as donations. But as far as our profit and loss statement went, they were going to waste, which is tough to manage and is a completely new element of our business. The marketplace and marketing, completely different as well. Again, with chefs, our marketing budget was basically nothing. Like, we would donate to events that they asked for, but we largely grew by word of mouth. We didn't actively market to restaurants. We didn't have a sales rep at all for the first 7 years of our business. But suddenly we are now trying to sell to a group of people who don't know who we are, because we've been a business-to-business facing brand. Unless you were heavily involved or in the food service industry or very much connected to the hospitality industry, it was tough to know who we were because we're not front and center or customer facing. So telling that story, communicating our values to people kind of blindly out in the ethos has been a remarkable challenge and something we continue to learn from every day. Next slide, please. So what's next? So this is, I read consumer reports and listen to different economic forecasts and things like that. But one of the things that stands out to me is that I believe that consumer behavior as far as grocery shopping is concerned, at least a good portion of that is permanently changed. I think the amount of people that will go back regularly to go into a grocery store for their main source of food, and a kind of chain grocery store for that matter, it has changed. And I think more people will be looking or continue to look for grocery online options. And I think we as players in the local food scene have a unique opportunity to provide that safe, reliable, convenient access to food from a known source that people are looking for. And I really hope that we are able to gain a significant mass of consumers that will be sticky, for lack of a better word, and it will continue these buying habits post pandemic. I think I'll speak global we, yourselves and ourselves as a distributor and a company that helps facilitate this. I think we have a unique opportunity to be that connection to where food comes from and how it's grown, beyond the previous farmers market customers. I think there's a great opportunity to connect and for people to have relationships with the people that grow their food. And I think at the end of the day, though, I don't think we can take that for granted. I think those that provide the best service with the most convenience and the most the best products and services will prevail. I think it would be naive of any of us to think that just because we have it means that people will buy it. We're still businesses at the end of the day, and they're still consumers with certain expectations at the end of the day. And as reluctant as I am, and I'm sure you are sometimes, to meet them to what their demands are, it's something we have to do. We offer home delivery now, which we didn't in the early days. At an extraordinary cost, as you can imagine. Before we drove our trucks to different neighborhoods in the city in the early days of the pandemic, and had time slots where people would pick it up, and we're literally a truck in a parking lot, and they're coming and getting their orders. And it was novel at the beginning. It was one of the only social things that people did, because they got out of their house, they got to see another human and see other people, and it had that novelty factor at the beginning. But as things died down, and especially coming into July and August, and as the caseload started to dissipate, and people started going back to grocery stores, or going up north, or leaving the city, whatever it might be, the demand for that kind of fell off. And we went from doing 30 to 40 pickups in a 2-hour period to sometimes 3. So we knew ultimately we had to meet the customer where they were, which at this time and continues to be at their home. So that's where we have pivoted to at this point. Next slide, please. And I'll end with a little bit of a cheesy note, but this is something I truly believe in. So Danielle Laporte is a Canadian entrepreneur and author, and her quote of the universe cannot resist authenticity. I think we're all very well positioned to provide that, and to be that genuine connection to the people and the land where our food comes from. And who else is better positioned to do that than people on the front lines and with their hands actually in the dirt, like yourselves. And I don't profess to be everything for everybody. We have our own little piece of the world here, and we're trying to do our best and provide that service on behalf of a network of producers and consumers. But I think we're all very well positioned, hopefully, to take advantage of this and provide something stellar, both in product and service, and really hopefully come out of the other side of this stronger than we were before. Next slide, please. And that is it from me. So there's my contact information should anyone wish to contact me. And it's been an absolute pleasure, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was a really interesting presentation. That certainly gave me some things to think about. I think before we open up for just a couple of questions, because we don't have a ton of time, but I think the main question that the viewers here would be wondering is how would they get involved with your business on a producer level, and is that a very short list of growers and producers that you work with, or are you looking actively for new growers all the time?
Both. It's a challenging time because our demand has largely evaporated. So we are actively looking for new vendors. Not to say we aren't. We currently, anyone kind of in the northwest of Durham region is relatively easy to work with. Kind of full disclosure, even though I am from Durham, we don't really have a full truck route that goes through Durham region currently. It was largely due to the fact of how long you had to drive kind of before you hit kind of got to Oshawa, and a lot of our early network, it was kind of a relic of our history of where the farms ended up starting to be clustered. That being said, though, there's other alternatives and arrangements that we have. We work with producers out near Ottawa as well, cheese producers and things like that. So not to say it can't be done. So my email address is there, but if you replace the Paul with info, so info at 100kilometerfoods.com, we have a vendor liaison that deals with onboarding new farms and starting that conversation. So I would encourage you to send an email to info at 100kilometerfoods.com.
Great, thanks. Anybody has a burning question for Paul?
Yeah, Paul, Tom Coleman here. Having met you when you were first forming the company, been a massive fan. I think your tenacity is brilliant. One thing that I'm absolutely amazed at is your B Corp certification. Having worked through Earthbound Farms, the original organic farmer that was part of Durham, and now working for Bond Well, that's our mission. And I think to attain that status is remarkable. You're in there with the global leaders like Patagonia, and I just think it would be one thing you should elevate that B Corp certification more relevant. A lot of people are falling in line with understanding B Corp, and I just want to say I think that's amazing that you attain that certification.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, with that, on behalf of Durham Farm Fresh, Paul, I'd like to thank you again for your time, for your excellent presentation. I'm sure you'll be hearing from myself, if not on behalf of Durham Farm Fresh, for more information. But many of the participants tonight here, I'm sure, are eager to. Thank you again.
Sounds great. And I'll be leaving now. I don't need to be privy to this, but I really appreciate the invitation, and thank you very much. And please do reach out should you wish to speak further. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.